My name is David McCartney. I'm with the Archives of Iowa Broadcasting at Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa. Today is Monday, the 18th day of November, 2019. I'm speaking with Max Lee Smith, and I am calling from my home. We are talking with Max from his home by telephone at Grand Junction, Colorado. Well, Max, let's begin by talking a bit about your family background, and you're a native Iowan. You mentioned already that you were born in Keokuk. I'd like to talk with you a bit about your childhood. I recall that when we met, you had moved a few years before from that area, Quincy, Illinois, up to northern Iowa. But I'd be interested to know about your childhood in Keokuk. Did you graduate from high school there?
No, born into a black land farmer family, blue-collar workers. Dad worked, first thing I recall about my father, of course, he was in the Navy at the time of the war, but had an older brother, older sister. Lived in Keokuk until I was 8 years old. At that time, moved to western Colorado, here to Grand Junction.
I see.
Stayed in Grand Junction until 1967, when I was into broadcasting, since 1961, and pursued my broadcasting career, which took me to Quincy, Illinois.
Okay.
And then from there on up to Mason City.
Okay. That's a good encapsulation of the time frame that we'll be talking about in a little bit more depth here. So you were 8 years old when your family moved out west. By that time, it was 1950, and your father was home from the armed services.
Correct.
What brought you to Grand Junction specifically?
My parents were brought out by a longtime school friend of my father's. We managed or they did at that time, we managed a motel in Grand Junction, which no longer exists, but it was called the Pioneer Lodge. There's a lot of history there, which we don't have time to go through today, and it would probably be very boring to you and your associates. But we had a lot of movie stars, recording artists who would come through there, and a lot of my contact with them, because I would be a runner for those celebrities to pick up hamburgers, soft drinks, things like that across the street from a nearby drive-in. But it reinforced my earlier interest in broadcasting, which dates back to when I was 4 years old, visiting a local radio station in Keokuk. And the host at that time, I can very well remember, his name is Sandy Sandusky. And actually, he took that stage name from a nearby town called Sandusky. And but that's when I became hooked on broadcast. And believe it or not, I was interested in the news from when my father came home for the military service. So I've kind of had that itch for many decades.
You mentioned being interested in news. Was it maybe an outgrowth from your childhood of interest in news dispatches from the various war fronts, or just a general interest in community reporting?
When we would attend theaters, which was very seldom at that time because we were a very poor family, but when we did attend the movies, there was always these little newsreel clips before the main feature.
Oh, yes.
And it would show, of course, delayed footage from the military areas, and my dad was in the South Pacific. So I always got interested in how that came about to be, to watch. I kept watching to see my father on a ship, which, of course, never happen. But, yeah, it hit me at a very early age.
So from 1950 until, at least until you graduated high school in Grand Junction, what year did you finish high school, or did you go right to work?
Yes, finished in 1960.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already been taking some college courses jointly at the time. And it was only about 3 or 4 months after high school graduation that I jumped right into full-time broadcast at a little town called Delta, Colorado, which is 40 miles from Grand Junction. The mom-and-pop radio station, KDTA, and that operated out of their home. A lot of history there, too.
I'd be interested in knowing more about that. It's in this day and age with larger corporate ownership of stations, it's quite unusual to think of a radio station as a mom and pop operation, as you just described it. Can you tell me a bit about that station? How did you end up there? You finished high school. Were you looking for employment at that time, specifically in radio?
I actively was pursuing broadcasting at that time. I had other employment, being newly out of high school, but because I knew I wanted to do something into broadcasting. It was just such what's the word I'm looking for? But anyhow, I had stopped by that station, and I did a voice track interview with them. And lo and behold, it was about within a month they called and asked if I would be interested in joining their staff as a which we called them DJs in those days, disc jockey. But that's where I also started incorporating on my own some local news items that I would pick up. Everything from bake sales to special events at the schools to something at the police station called the police blotter, which was completely alien to me at that time.
You were about 18 then when you started working at that station?
Correct. And over the course of my career, wherever I might have been located at the time, because we moved about every 5 years or so, I would enroll at local colleges, community colleges, and take various courses here and there, mostly in history, English, current events.
Mm-hmm.
Could try to be relatable for the job that I was in.
This was a strategy you took in order, as you said, to have this coursework be pertinent to the work that you did, and that's an interesting approach. Very often, young men, predominantly men at the time, some women, but it was a male-dominated field at that time, were inclined to go to a trade school to learn broadcasting techniques. Did you ever do that, or did you remain with the classical type courses that you mentioned?
I had always had no problem speaking in front of people. I was able to relate to a variety of subjects. I probably had an upper hand on a lot of my classmates for the simple fact, as mentioned earlier, we came from a very poor family. So I started working summertime jobs, after-school jobs, when I was 13 years of age. And by the time I reached 18, I was probably relatable to more young men in their mid-20s because of experiences I had. So I was not afraid to step out into the world. I had researched with a lot of veteran broadcasters what to do, how to go about it, and found out that many of them, pardon me, had no college degree. They attended some college. Quite a few did not. But at that time, there was not really the college emphasis as we've learned since then. It was get in there, do the job, sink or swim. Everyone's responsible for your own actions, So, and I was told it was recommended to me to plan on moving every 5 to 6 years, trying to move up, not backwards, parallel, okay, but move up, more responsibilities, that type of thing. So I set out a 25-year goal, both my wife and I, and we agreed to set out a goal like that, and over the next 27, 28 years, we moved almost every 5 years, give or take 6 months either way.
You mentioned your wife. How old were you when you married?
We were both 18.
Ah.
We got married, so we've been married 59 years.
Congratulations. She knew very early on then that this was your plan, and it's quite unusual for a young man of that age to look so far ahead with a very specific incremental set of goals in mind. And as you said, it very well would have come from your early experience.
It would require a lot of sacrifices. There were fat times, thin times, high times, low times. But when, because we got married at an early age at 18, And so we were still kids ourselves to some degree when you look at it today. So we grew up together.
You were in this small community in northwestern Colorado, then, or western Colorado, for you said about 5 years.
I started out at KDTA in Delta. Within a year and a half, moved to a brand new radio station here in Grand Junction. We were on the ground floor building our own mom and pop station. Stayed with that radio station for several years. Moved across town to a very well-established #1 radio station at that time, KGLO, and I was the news department. Some of the notables, of course, included a lot of Hollywood celebrities who were into Western Colorado to make movies. So I got that aspect of it with interviewing those individuals. Our station sponsored the late Paul Harvey for an appearance, and I spent a day and a half with Mr. Harvey, which was unbelievable. The man was a work machine. And our station burned down subsequently, and Mr. Harvey, had came to town shortly after that. And I cherish the picture that I have this day, because I'm not in physical stature. I'm a short person. Paul Harvey's a tall person. He was combing the top of my hair, and someone took a picture. And I love it, hanging on the wall to this day.
That's wonderful. The first, I want to back up just a moment. In Grand Junction, the first station you worked at, by chance, was that KREX? Or...
No, KREX came into play eventually as a television station.
I see.
When I decided after 5 years, it's coming up in 1967, it's time for me to move on, and I was wanting to get into television. They were the only television station in town at the time, and they offered me a position to join their news team under the news directorship of the late Ted Ford. But I knew I wanted to get back to the Midwest, to some of my family was still back there, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. I felt comfortable if I took my young wife and young children with me that we would sink or swim together as a family. Made the decision to leave Grand Junction in January of '67 and for Quincy, Illinois.
So beginning January of 1967, you went to WGEM in Quincy, if I understand correctly?
Yeah, WGEM.
Okay.
Right into television. I had no television experience, but I had been on the radio staff there for just 3 weeks. And they tossed me in. I say tossed me in to television on an early morning show on the cut-ins for the NBC affiliate at the time. And I stayed with it then for the next 26 years.
When, you remained in television for the next 26 years, you mean?
Correct.
Okay. If I may back up for a moment, I'm not quite clear about your experience at Grand Junction. This was, were you actually involved with KREX TV in Grand Junction, or? Okay.
Just friendly competition.
Okay, got it. So WGEM then was your first television experience, and in addition to the on-camera segments that you had, I'm guessing during the Today Show, the cutaways, did you begin doing more news-related work at that point as well?
Oh, yeah. I was in full-time news staff, and within 6 months, I was made the main anchor, co-anchor for the early evening and late evening news. A lot of experience there with that NBC affiliate. Someday I would really like to write a book of my background experience, but in Quincy, it's right on the Mississippi River, and what really stands out is one night 5 barges, gasoline-laden barges on the Mississippi, broke loose from their moorings and caught fire, drifted downstream for about 4 or 5 miles towards Hannibal. In the process, they became lodged against railroad abutments. We filmed this one night at 2:30 in the morning, and we had just scooted out. I say we, several friends that I knew, we just scooted out about 50 yards away in the middle of the Mississippi when one of the barges blew, and blew us towards the shore with such powerful force. But I went back to the station and processed that film and got that onto the Today Show by 6 o'clock in Chicago that morning.
I had no idea, and this is very great fortune that you were. I hope you were not injured in that. Incident.
The only times I've been injured was several times in Quincy when a cameraman and I were physically attacked by some striking members, labor union members, because we filmed them gambling on the public sidewalk, and they didn't take too kindly to that. But we aired that segment intact with the physicality of it all at 10 o'clock news that evening on advice of the station attorney. And these strikers had been on the line for about 3 years. And as a result of that incident, the strike was settled within 2 months.
Interesting. Do you recall which company and which union were involved in that particular incident?
It was a Firestone company.
I see. And United Rubber Workers Union, I assume, or
yeah, one of the ancillary unions there at the time.
Okay. You were primarily, well, this is interesting, and I have thought about this in terms of particularly in small market television where the anchor also does field reporting.
Exactly.
And in that capacity at Quincy, you were essentially donning two hats, I would imagine, although the two are very, very closely related.
You have to have 4 or 5 irons in the fire at the same time. You have to have a good knowledge, a little bit of everything, but not perfect at anything. Hannibal was 16 miles away, and another memorable experience there was 3 young people got lost. Hannibal is saturated with underground caves, you're probably aware.
Yes.
That's as Mark Twain wrote about. But 3 young people, a brother and a sister and a friend, under the age of 8, all of them, got lost in some caves during their highway construction work. After our 10 o'clock news at night, we would change clothes, run down there, join the spelunkers, and we would search various caves with them, all to no avail. This went on for a month because it became, from a rescue to trying to find them. And in the we would go into unknown caves. Some you really had to squeeze in through tide to get into an opening. But we would spray paint an X on that opening. And one morning we came out after searching caves for about 6 hours, my cameraman and I with the spelunkers. And this one X had separated almost 8 inches. That's how much that ground was shifting. It was sensitive ground because of the highway construction. To the best of my knowledge, because I left there in 1973, but to the best of my knowledge, those 3 youngsters were never found.
What a tragedy, and I can't help but think that reporters often are put into that position, and they are, of course, tasked with reporting the news, but not becoming, of course, emotionally involved in what they're covering.
And it was emotional for me, Dave, because my children were at that age at the same time.
Yeah.
So I really had much sympathy for the family and the friends of those youngsters. We tried doing everything we could because we had the portable mobile lights on our camera gear, which helped in the search effort at night. So, and it was a community-wide effort. Believe me, there were news people, representatives from across the country. We were not the only ones doing that at night. We were joined by a host from St. Louis, Chicago, Columbia. A lot of widespread area participation.
That brings up a question of working with other members of the media when stories like this break. There are different schools of thought on this. Do you consider them competitors when they are outside your market area, or do you cooperate with them when a story breaks?
In those days, I looked upon it, and I think my colleagues did at the same time. We were all in the same boat together, but who could get it on the air first, and factual, and verified. You couldn't help but be competitive. But at the same time, you had much respect for one another because, gee, some of those guys are from a bigger market. That's where I want to go. So you wouldn't want to cut off your bridges.
Sure. Well, that leads to an interesting point that I seem to recall, and help me if I'm incorrect in my memory, but in the Quincy, Hannibal, Keokuk TV market, there is or was at least, a CBS affiliate in Hannibal that competed with Channel 10. And the story, I think you may have told me at one time, or perhaps another colleague at Mason City mentioned to me, that Lee Enterprises owned Channel 7 in Hannibal, and they weren't too thrilled with the fact that their competitor was doing so well in the Quincy market. Can you tell me that story, if that...
Well,
am I correct?
Long story short?
Well, or make it long. It's fine. All the details are fine.
I had been at WGEM 6 years, so I was a little over my 5-year game plan, so to speak. And I went and knocked on the door of Lee Enterprises. They were 1 block away, and talked with the general manager, saying, I'd like to go to work for your company. I thought maybe he was going to have a cardiac arrest for me in front of me at the time. Within 3 weeks, I was hired to join their sister station in Mason City, Iowa, as news director and anchor.
And that was in 1973.
March of 1973, I made the switch, yes, from Quincy, 5.5 hours away by drive time to Mason City.
At that time, up until that time, I believe Ken Q was your predecessor as news director at Channel 3. And you were, I believe, the first new news director at that station in nearly 20 years. Mason City.
Mr. Q, the late Mr. Q, had been there, several decades. And he was eventually, he left the station on his own volition and was elected mayor of Mason City. So we had an amicable separation, as could be expected at the time, being sensitive to his situation. New guy comes into town from out of town, new guy takes over, boom, what do you do? But we got along as adults there until he made the decision that it was time for him to move on to other parts of his life, and he was elected mayor, hands down, no problem. He was Mr. Personality throughout north central Iowa.
When you stepped into that role as news director in 1973, can you describe for me what you saw at Mason City in terms of the physical plant, the TV station as it had been equipped at that time?
It had a very good reputation, had very good personnel on the air. I was moving into a first-time television news director's job. In Quincy, I was not the news director. I had a lot of input on individual shows and what we were doing, but as far as managing people, that was the first time in Mason City. So I relied on the existing staff for much of the information. They were very, very accommodating on introducing me to shakers and makers and movers throughout the town, throughout the community. And it was a small market, as you well know, so it didn't take long for people to recognize who you were and what you were doing. And some people welcomed me to town. Some others, they were negative because their favorite news director, news anchor had been there for so long. So they thought maybe that was a little rough on the station for hiring someone new to come in. But by and large, I think we did the job okay. We maintained ratings. We had very good ratings, very good rapport, and not a whole lot of staff turnover. You have your traditional staff turnover that happens. But no, I accepted it as a challenge. I made the decision to accept the job, so I knew I had a job to do.
There was I remember the staff myself very well. I, as you know, joined as an intern one summer in 1976, and at that time the staff had been quite well established, and I think perhaps one or two of the staff members were relatively new when you came on board. But for the most part, you're right, a very well established staff.
Very stable.
Yes, very stable. And something of an anomaly for broadcasting. As you said, there is this expectation of turnover, but in some operations that may not always be the case, at least given a particular group of individuals who remained for quite a number of years.
Well, you know, Dave, if I may interrupt, you mentioned earlier about working or non-working with competitors, local market, out of market. Iowa being a flyover state, of course, and the big guns from Des Moines, they got all of the attention statewide. The rest of us out on the hinterland, we kind of hung in there. But I guess I was fairly aggressive in contacting the AP representatives, the UPI representatives out of Des Moines, getting a better pulse on the state as a whole. And I became good friends with the aide to the governor, Governor Ray at the time.
Yes.
And he introduced me in turn to a lot of my out-of-region competitors. But we would swap film stories. We would exchange stories to help one another. Because if I needed some information from Lamar's, Iowa, I got hold of a news director at the radio station there, first name Larry, I forget his last name at this time, and vice versa. So you did a lot of exchange. You helped a lot of each other, because the more each of you get on the air with the news that we think people need or want to know about, it only made sense to help one another.
That's an ethic that doesn't happen very often in a business that is very often regarded as highly competitive. But as you said, in a rural, small market-oriented area, that seems to change the complexion or the makeup of that feeling of competition. Not that there is no competition, but there is a sense of, as you said, camaraderie among other professionals. That's interesting.
Well, part of it leads to your successful survival through ratings, and that's what everyone is after. It is a business. It was a business. Still is. If one other thing I want to interject to you at the time, you may or may not recall, Iowa had its first entry into the Calaveras County frog jumping contest in California because of our effort at Mason City. I always thinking of something new to get a little attention from the viewers, instead of being the same old 1, 2, 3 presentation every evening. Let's get something for Iowa. So I got hold of the aide to Governor Ray at the time and said, "We need a frog." Kind of shocked him. He said, "What for?" And I told him why. I'll be darned, we got a frog. They had a state jump-off contest. The frog was flown out to Calaveras County, and it didn't do worth a darn, but Iowa got its name in the papers a little bit more because of that.
I did not hear that story, but that's an interesting first to lay claim to, I would say.
Yep.
Well, I was thinking of another first, which, again, may or may not be accurate. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but was KGLO TV possibly the first news department in Iowa to implement mobile video recording equipment as opposed to film?
You're exactly right. We had Lee Enterprises was always looking out for how to capture a market with something new. The president at the time was quite the visionary. He was looking 20, 30 years ahead of time. In the mid-'70s, we had a corporate-wide meeting, and he had explained to us about something called little computers. Well, that was a new word. and to our business at the time. So we consequently were the very first ones with a reel-to-reel video recording with equipment by the name of a Kai. And it was quite the experience for people at home, because they didn't know if the video of the local personalities was going to come out green, purple, orange, or blue. They put up with that. It was a challenge every day. Cumbersome equipment at the time, but yes, KGLO, subsequently KIMT, was the first one in the state. We were also the first one in Iowa to use cameras in the courtroom. And I was fortunate to be on that committee to write up the criteria for working with the courts. And we broadcast several events of cameras in the courtroom that we recorded and had on the air within a couple of hours.
If you could expand a bit on that to tell me approximately when that occurred, and do you recall what the trial was that you were directly involved
Why
with?
did I know you were going to ask that question? I'm trying to think what the trial was. I think it might have been a murder trial. Don't hold me to that. Because we had to justify our time and equipment and investment, to go cover a trial. Because you're taking people and equipment off the street in a small market to do that. But as the cameras in the courtroom coordinator for that area, I do remember there were stations from Waterloo, Des Moines, and from up north from Albert Lee that wanted to either have their cameras set up or if we could make them a copy of the day's events. So I do believe it was a murder trial. Specifically what trial it was, I have no idea, but that was like in 1970, 74, 75 when that occurred. I also at that time was interviewed by several college graduates and undergraduates for their theses on cameras in the courtroom. So the station got extra exposure for that, and Lee Enterprises did tremendously.
If you do learn of any more or recall any more details of that, the name of the case and the date and venue, let me know. Don't go to any extra effort, but if you're able to confirm that further, I would be interested in reassembling that narrative again.
Right.
You might recall.
I would too now, because it tickled my interest here. And I'm usually pretty good, but that's been quite a while ago on memory. So, but we can pursue it.
I do recall, and not to belabor the point of this, but I am interested for a personal reason. My father was named to the bench. He was district court judge in District 2, Northern Iowa, for a number of years, and I believe Governor Ray nominated him for the bench in about 1977. And I remember a conversation with my dad at the time, not long after he went on the bench, that this came up. And I was studying journalism at college at the time, and I was interested in this as terms of access issue. And my dad and I were talking about it over coffee, and he did tell me he worked with you on this, and as he put it, I wanted to make sure it would work. Those were his words. He felt, as a jurist, he of course had some hesitation about it, but he also knew that this was in the public interest ultimately, and as I was very proud of him. He said, I want to make sure it works, and I'll never forget that line from him at least. But I think he may have worked with you, and if you, I'm
But
trying to
when your father was in the State House, being the area representative, he was an easy go-to target to get comments and follow-ups and reaction for what happened at the Capitol, that day or that week. So I always made sure to let him know of our interest to represent the entire area of north central Iowa with the correct qualified and quality information. Your dad was always on the uppermost cutting edge of that, and he seemed to always make himself available to us. When you're down at the State House as a representative or state senator, you get inundated at times with the news media, particularly from Des Moines. But when we from Mason City would go down to Des Moines to cover Capitol events, your father, along with Senator Charles Grassley, always made themselves available to us because we were their conduit for the north central part of the state. So it was a two-way street, and it worked out very well.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I know Dad thought very highly of many reporters he had been in contact with over the years, and that's not something you typically would expect to hear from somebody in public office. So
No.
Thank you for it.
Especially today.
Yes, indeed. Well, in your time at Mason City, what other recollections do you have from your leading that news department? This was kind of an unusual market in that the two competing network affiliates at the time were in another state. They were based in Minnesota. So I suspect that there was some type of, I don't know if I would call it an unwritten understanding or maybe an assumption that viewers would tend to congregate toward their home state station.
Well, there's loyalty, Minnesota viewers are going to watch Minnesota, Iowa viewers are going to watch Iowa. We had actually three of us. We had Albert, Lee, Austin, and then Rochester as competitors. Rochester being the main competitor at the time. We would scoop them, they would scoop us, et cetera, et cetera. But being 90 miles away, even though they were the main competitor because of broadcast signal overlap, we each pretty much focused on our immediate news area within a 25 or 30 mile area. But we would occasionally swap video because it only made sense. And particularly in the wintertime when travel was so a challenge, if one had the video and we could get it to the other one, we didn't do it with satellite at that time, of course, but it had to be done, over the road. And it was easier to swap and exchange in a story that, rather than trying to send out crews in that kind of weather. When you say what some things I remember, there was one winter there where we ended up with almost 8 foot of snow drifts of 20 foot high, and our station was equipped with cots, fold-up cots. If nighttime people that worked at 10 o'clock couldn't get home, they had to stay at the station so they could open it up in the morning. And that did happen several times. The number one air personality at that time was our weatherman, Mr. Bob Clausen, the late Mr. Bob Clausen.
Oh, yes.
And he lived in Clear Lake, only 9 miles away. Well, he couldn't get home. And there was one Friday night, Saturday. He finally got home Sunday. But he filled time on the air with a lot of weather because other people couldn't get in neither. And I lived in town. Fortunately, I was able to get back and forth. But Bob and I hung it out there for a day and a half together.
That's that feeling of, at this time internally within a news department, that feeling of camaraderie that comes up, especially when there is an emergency such as that.
Well, and we owed it to the viewers, We had loyal viewers there because many of them wanted to know what was happening, what was going on. And actually, they knew just as much as we did. We just glorified it up a little more.
Tell me how, with a fairly small news department at the time, at least, in Mason City, and you were, as news director, responsible for managing about a half dozen individuals. How were their tasks laid out? Did each reporter have a particular beat or area of expertise that you would assign them? Or
well, I glossed over it earlier. Everyone in the newsroom had to have pretty good knowledge of anything and everything around them, some curiosity to learn about it, but you're not an expert in anything. If you could get 80% efficiency on knowledge of something, you're going to make it in a small market. Just like today, the small market people have to handle their own cameras, their own setups. They no longer go out, very seldom, with a separate person or two to handle video and handle audio. You got to be a jack of all trades. It's just too competitive. Small markets even today are struggling to exist because of the revenue is not there as it used to be. But in those days, we had people who were curious. I guess we were lucky at our station, maybe because of the reputation was established long before I got there. But everyone was a friendly type of person. All of the staff members, I had to accompany them to many different events, speaking engagements. Everyone knew our staff on first name basis, welcomed them into their business, to their homes, to their platform. It was really a family affair. I guess that's kind of how we related to a lot of the viewers, that, hey, you pinch us, we hurt. You cut us a little bit, we're going to bleed. We're family. We're one of you. We didn't put ourselves above the audience by any means. We never did try that.
Thank you. That's a very nice summation of how things work, and particularly in a small market. I'd like to, if I may, talk a little bit about the technology at the time. We've already discussed the implementation of portable video equipment, but to a researcher today who may not have viewed a newscast from, say, 1975, what differences do you think exist now that distinguish today's newscast from, say, 40 or 45 or 50 years ago?
Well, technology, of course, has improved tremendously. When we started into having our mobile video units, like I say, the reel-to-reel Akai's, but the gem of the day would be to have what was called a RCAT K76 camera. Well, it's just about the same size as many cameras today, but today's technology is so far advanced. But the basic rule of thumb is to be a successful newsroom, to be a successful reporter, there still have to be an objective, neutral reporter. Unfortunately, that's not the case today. I'm going to elaborate here a little bit. You may or may not want this, so feel free to cut me off. But in my opinion, the objectivity of television journalism died with the Vietnam War. Several things were responsible for that. The technology. It was fast. Those people who are old enough to remember, every night, most of the networks did what General Westmoreland's PR department had requested, a body count. Now, when you have to do a body count coming into your home at mealtime, all of a sudden people start becoming desensitized. Oh, what is it today? 76, 22, 115. Oh, okay. I got caught up into that. In order to be first on the air and get the emotional reaction of families, I would call up someone because we got the information over the AP, the names of the casualties, American casualties of the day. So I would call Mr. or Mrs., let's just say Smith, out in Hinterland. What's your reaction? Your son we were notified your son was killed today. I feel so bad for having done that. That started when I was in Quincy. To this day, that bothers me. But when I look around, I I guess maybe I wasn't mature enough at the time to see many of my competitors did that without a blink of an eye. It took me 4 or 5 years to realize that was a horrible time in my career to have done that. But then the international correspondents started giving their opinions, their own commentary, not studio commentary. News department on a large scale, large market or national market today. That is just not my cup of tea.
You are right. The climate is very different now from an earlier time. Max, I'm afraid I may have missed a portion of your comment. I needed to very quickly switch a battery here, and I apologize for that. But
no problem.
You were, if I may ask, if you could reiterate the temper of the time, and of course as you mentioned, which I do have on record, the desensitization of society. And I think this is a very important and very interesting point. And you raised it very poignantly, I thought, a couple of minutes ago. About the time that the battery began to fail on my recorder, and I apologize for that, but I do have it prepared now. You began referencing All in the Family, which was a very popular television sitcom beginning in the early 1970s. What concerned you about that and the nature of that type of programming?
Well, the FCC up to that point had been very strict on the type of language that you would hear on television and radio. The common four-letter words, they were not there. When Archie Bunker came on the air, all of a sudden we started hearing, damn, hell, and it evolved on to the words after that. It became an accepted norm. You see it in movie production, television productions today. How you treat your neighbors, how you want to be treated by your neighbors. Well, Archie Bunker was a very, I think, underneath, a soft individual, but his facade that he attempted to demonstrate was, this is not acceptable, that's not acceptable to society, and it was expounded upon by the entertainment world. And pretty soon you had offshoots pretty fast. And then it showed it interracial marriage. Why, in those days, it was almost unheard of. That opened some doors. And I think for the better. But the way it was portrayed at the time, it was like, oh, you hold your breath when that couple walks in. And it was an eye-opener. Now look at your productions today as far as the violence is concerned, and that's a whole new different subject which neither you or I have time for. But basically, as a whole, Hollywood is anti-gun. But what's the majority of production that comes out of Hollywood? It's guns. So, I probably would not fit. I would be a dinosaur. I would be an antique in today's television newsroom.
Well, you raise important points, and I appreciate your doing that. In this revelation that you had upon reflection of what you had done in Quincy and your subsequent regret, and I would hazard to say that that you are not alone. There are perhaps many journalists who have had similar regrets, and I certainly have. One reason I personally left journalism was I felt that I was not of an aggressive enough nature to be an effective reporter, or perhaps it would not be the nature of the work that I would want to do indefinitely. Did this revelation to you from your work at Quincy, did that influence your work in the future, in the continuation of your broadcast career? Did that temper your actions at all?
How long did I stay in broadcasting and why did I get out? I can tell you in a nutshell. Having left Mason City in 1981. I then joined an ABC affiliate in Rockford, Illinois, as the news director. Full-time news director, I relinquished my anchor duties because I had a 22-member staff. So I went from 6 to 7 people to 22, a lot more responsibility. Again, I would butt heads. Our department would butt heads with labor unions. Pretty soon, I found myself directing and writing the same story from decades earlier to decades later, just changing the names and changing the dates. It got to be repetitive. Rockford had an image, rightly or wrongfully at the time, because it was a heavy blue-collar town, still is, but as a retirement area for the mafioso. And you may find that an eye-opener, I don't know. But I and my family were personally threatened. And we were also threatened in Mason City by labor unions, particularly the typographer unions out of Madison, Wisconsin. Again, family, individually, collectively threatened with bodily harm for covering stories. I guess it wasn't so much that as it just became repetitive. Politics, I got more and more interested in politics, and then I got really turned off by it. I'm still quite a political activist to this day, but there's certain aspects of it that started becoming redundant. And I would say in the last 25, 30 years, nothing's changed. Now, no offense to your late father, but I eventually found myself saying that politicians only lie when their lips are moving.
Yeah, no offense taken.
Thank you.
I think
I have a lot of respect for your father.
Well, thank you.
And your upbringing is a strong indication of. I think you would have succeeded had you chose to pursue journalism. You're still doing it in some fashion. You do realize that, of course.
Well, it is information-based, and I am absolutely, I don't know what the word is, grateful, I think, is the word that comes to mind with the work that I did eventually choose to do. So for that, I do appreciate it, and certainly I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me back in 1976 when I was a very, very inexperienced 20-year-old college sophomore, and you allowed me into the newsroom for 3 months, and it was...
Well, I think you probably matured a lot more in some areas with eye-openers in that short time than you realize you actually did. So hopefully we contributed to some part to your success that you're showing today. We were always interested in having interns join our staff, anywhere from 3 months to a year. Many of them went on to bigger and better things. In Mason City, in Rockford, one of my interns went on to be a news director in Detroit. Another one went on to be a manager at a PBR station in Plattsburgh, New York. And you remember him, John Flanzer.
Yes, I do remember John.
Yes. We've maintained contacts over all the years. A fellow from Waterloo, Mr. Segrist.
Yes, Mark.
Went to be a very successful reporter, doing some anchor work in Milwaukee. So we can include you along many of those who have become very successful in their life, maybe not in journalism, maybe something else, but I think we contributed to some part there, some maturation effect.
Well, again, thank you. It was a tremendous opportunity for me personally, and I'm always grateful for that. Max, do you have any, we'll kind of start winding down here, but if you have any additional thoughts you would like to include, and if not today, if you think of anything later, you can contact me as well. But do you have any further thoughts that you'd like to share at this time?
Well, the only thing is once a news junkie, always a news junkie. To this day, I look at our local station out here. We're in a very small market, and it's unfortunate the young people who are attempting to be anchors, reporters, they're not able to get the resources, financial resources, at their local stations to really do a bang-up job. I think I represented the last of a dying breed when news was an objective journalistic endeavor. But I enjoyed it, but I haven't gotten out of my system. But could I fit in today? No. I just complained from the sidelines.
Well, we need those too. So,
you bet. I appreciate the opportunity. Very good to hear from you again. Glad to see you're doing what you are doing.
Thank you.
We got to keep some sort of semblance of what got us from there to here today.
We shall keep in touch, and I will. I'll send you those forms I mentioned. You'll be hearing from me in the postal mail in the next couple of weeks. And
that'll be fine. Look forward to it.
And Max, again, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Good luck, Dave.
Take good care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.